Mr. Angus Robertson.
The single European market and the ability to impact the legislation that governs it is hugely important to the Scottish economy, especially the exporting sectors such as whisky. Will the Secretary of State confirm that regardless of the ongoing negotiations, he will personally campaign for Scotland and the UK to remain within the European Union?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman will know, and I'm sure will be pleased to have heard, that the leader of the Scottish Conservative Unionist Party, Ruth Davidson, has expressed exactly that position.
Angus Robertson.
Well, the good news, I get a second bite at the cherry, so perhaps at the end of this question the Secretary of State can answer the question about whether he will support Scotland and the UK remaining within the European Union. Making a positive case for remaining in the EU will be crucial in the weeks and the months ahead. So, will the Secretary of State give a commitment not to repeat the grinding negativity of Project Fear and condemn ridiculous scare stories such as those from the Prime Minister on immigration and the refugee camp in Calais?
Kirsten Oswald.
Mr. Speaker, I wonder if the Secretary of State is able to tell me what discussions he has had with Scottish businesses about the possibility of a UK exit from the EU and what concerns they've raised about the impact that this would have on their ability to access and export to the single market.
Mr. Wishart.
Mr. Speaker, the negotiations about the fiscal framework are in a very sensitive and fragile state, and we've got to be very careful about the language that's used. Now, the Secretary of State was using language like ludicrous and chancing hazard when it was coming to one party in this negotiation. It was profoundly unhelpful, Secretary of State. If the Secretary of State and the Scotland Office have got nothing to offer these negotiations discussion, will he vow to stay right out of it and leave those who want to get a solution in place to try and get these negotiations fixed?
Dr. Eilidh Whiteford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What discussions has the Secretary of State had with the Chancellor about continued funding for seismic surveys on the UK continental shelf?
McLaughlin.
Mr. Speaker, the Smith Agreement devolved employability funding and services to Scotland. Then the autumn statement cut funding for it by an eye-watering 87%, so the Scottish Government now has only £7 million to deliver those services. Notwithstanding the general acceptance that this was a politically motivated decision, what does the Minister say to my constituents in Glasgow North East, one of the areas of highest deprivation in the whole of the United Kingdom, who are, after all, the people that this is going to impact on most of all?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due to the changes from DLA to PIP, thousands of Scots are losing their rights to motorbility vehicles. This is particularly devastating in rural areas where accessible public transport may be limited. Will the Minister end this iniquitous policy?
Chris Law.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under the SNP Scottish Government, Scotland's youth employment is at its highest level in 2005 and is 7% higher than the rest of the UK. Can the Secretary of State reassure me that he will make representations to the Secretary of State for Business, Innovation and Skills to ensure that Scotland receives a fair share of funding from the apprenticeship levy?
Absolutely.
Nicolson.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister claims that he's going to get a good deal for Britain in the European Union. Would the Secretary of State like to see the United Kingdom play the same role and have the same level of powers in the EU that Scotland currently has, he claims, in the UK?
Boswell! Mr. Boswell!
Mr. Speaker, in the interest of the record, can the Secretary of State confirm that under the powers that are being devolved as part of the current Scotland Bill, the Scottish Government will be able to vary rates and bands of the Scottish rate of income tax, allowing the Scottish Government to make...
Order! The common courtesy to allow him to be heard by their own ministers. Mr. Phil Boswell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are getting used to it, I would add. In the interest of the record, can the Secretary of State confirm that under the powers that are currently being devolved as part of the current Scotland Bill, the Scottish Government will be able to vary rates and bands of the Scottish rate of income tax, allowing the Scottish Government to make progressive choices on these additional powers and the Labour half-baked plan to raise Scottish income tax for everyone before these additional powers are transferred was seen
we've got the gist. Order.
Thank you. We in these benches join in the condolences of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition in relation to Harry Harpham and pass on our best wishes to his family at this sad and difficult time. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister made a vow and his party signed an agreement that there would be no detriment to Scotland with new devolution arrangements. Why is the UK Treasury proposing plans that may be detrimental towards Scotland to the tune of £3 billion? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the context of referendums, whether in Scotland or across the UK on EU membership, don't voters have a right to know that what is promised by the UK government can be trusted and will be delivered in full? So will the Prime Minister tell the Treasury that time is running out on delivering a fair fiscal framework and that they must agree a deal that is fair both to the people of Scotland and fair to the rest of the United Kingdom?
Weir!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Women's age groups, including my own and Angus, have raised serious concerns that changes in housing benefit may force the closure of many refuges. Will the Prime Minister undertake to specifically exclude refuges from these changes and protect this vital service for vulnerable women?
Joanna Cherry!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that how we protect human rights in the legal systems of the United Kingdom deserves full and careful consideration? And will he give an assurance that his consultation on the repeal of the Human Rights Act will not conflict with the pre-election purdah periods in Scotland and the other devolved administrations?
John Nicolson!
Mr. Speaker, sir, on Monday I attended the Work and Pensions Tribunal appeal hearing for my constituent, Mrs. Jackie Millen, a brave, inspiring woman who has dwarfism. Despite being unable to climb staircases except on all fours, she was awarded 0 disability points by her assessor. Can I ask the Prime Minister whether he has, as a constituency MP, himself attended any tribunal hearings, and if so, whether he found the process fair, dignified and compassionate?